Smart devices and the Internet of Things, or IoT, pose security and privacy risks that consumers are not always aware of. A cyber label, along with new legislation, could offer protection. Brandon Pugh is a resident senior fellow at the R Street Institute. Brandon, welcome to the program.
Well, good morning, Mimi. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here for this timely topic.
Spell out for us the security and privacy risks of smart devices.
Sure. So let me first say, IoT devices or Internet of Things devices, they have many benefits and they offer many conveniences, but there are so many risks with them as well. And this is particularly important because by the end of the year, there's estimated to be 14.4 billion of them. But we've also seen some security risks. I mean, I think one of the earliest examples was a mother finding out that a nefarious actor was spying on her baby through the webcam. Another case, we saw individuals being able to access front doors with smart locks. So while there's many benefits on a daily basis, there's as many security risks with them. And I think that's really the important thing for consumers to know.
Is this just for household devices, or is there a concern for breaching critical infrastructure as well?
So there's two things. So what the White House is currently focusing on, that's limited to consumer devices. But you're right. IoT devices are present in critical infrastructure. We see them used in water processing plants, in nuclear power plants. But the current focus of the White House is strictly limited to consumer-facing devices.
So there was an act that was just introduced in the Senate. It's called the Informing Consumers About Smart Devices Act. What would it do?
Yes, so that's a piece of legislation by Senators Cantwell and Cruz. So thrilled to see the bipartisan legislation. But essentially, that would require manufacturers to tell consumers if the device has a microphone or is capable of taking video. That way, at least consumers would know when they're buying a product that that device is capturing their audio or their video, because too often times consumers don't know that and are unknowingly buying these devices.
Okay, so government and industry leaders are coming together. They're discussing the development of a cyber label to identify whether products meet certain security standards. How would that work? I mean, would companies self-certify?
That's a great point. So this is being called the Energy Star label for cyber, which we know in the EPA's context, which is on, when we buy a washer and dryer. This would be the equivalent for IoT devices. So essentially, the exact details of it are still up in the air, but the White House is coordinating this initiative. The thought would be is you would see some sort of QR code or some sort of check mark on a product as a consumer. That way, when you're buying it, it's met some level of baseline security standards. So the advantage of having some sort of QR code is you can see in real time it's still compliant, because there's a difference between it was compliant 10 years ago when it was boxed versus what's happened now, because security changes by the second.
And who would set those standards, Brandon?
So that's still in the works. The White House is actively working with industry groups, associations, and the R Street Institute. Myself, I was fortunate to be present. So the thought is now that NIST, which is a government agency, they would help establish a baseline, and then potentially industry associations would help carry them out. But to your earlier point, it's still up in the air in terms of, would a company self-attest that they are in compliance, or should there be a role for a third party to see if they're actually in compliance?
And then should one standard apply to all devices, or should there be higher standards for devices with greater risk?
Yes. So right now, the White House is starting small. Their thought is, let's start on two of the most commonly purchased consumer devices. That being Ring doorbells, not to single out Ring, but even in a broader picture, any type of electronic doorbell. So that's one of the areas they're starting. But you're right. I think there needs to be a different level of framework for the different products. So because not every product has the same level of security concerns, there are large variations. And those are the types of questions that are being worked through right now with the White House and in industry groups.
So what else do you think needs to happen, Brandon, to not only make those labels effective, but really protect consumers?
So the first is really consumer education, because if we just put a label in a box and consumers don't understand what that means, then its effectiveness is really limited. And the way I see these labels, there are two main benefits. One is it's telling the consumer, first off, that the product they're buying is safe and secure to a degree. And then secondly, it's helping establish a baseline, because it's really like the Wild West in this world now. One company may follow fantastic security standards, but another third party, maybe a small company in another country, potentially an adversary, they may not follow security at all. So this is really helping establish that. And letting consumers know the importance is the first step.
So there's also the issue of devices made overseas by foreign companies. So how would American standards apply to those devices?
Yes, so there's efforts around the world right now to have labeling initiatives. We saw Singapore actually beat us to it. So they have a labeling program established, and there's several other countries around the world. And this is a concern of mine. We don't want to see the United States create a label program here and then have 5, 6, or potentially dozens around the world. I think any effort that the White House does here needs to be consistent, and there needs to be an effort to harmonize them, both for the benefit of consumers and industry. So we're not trying to understand that's a Chinese label or that's a Singapore label, but this is a US label. What are the differences? So having, I think, one approach is just so important.
All right. Well, Brandon, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure, Mimi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.